Вітаємо, пане Олеже.
Welcome, Oleg. Good afternoon.
Це другий етап конкурсного відбору.
This is the second stage of the selection for the High Qualification Commission of Judges, the interview stage.
Співбесіду з вами конкурсна комісія проводить в повному
The
складі.
selection commission in its full composition is holding this interview. These are Yevhen Mezentsev, me, Ivan Mishenko, Robert Brugheisen, Serhiy Verlanov, Tetza Zhechny, and Stephen Markman.
Доповідачами на
The
вашому
reporters
інтерв'ю,
at
пане
your
Олеже,
interview are Robert
Олег
Brugheisen and Yevhen Mezentsev.
Під час співбесіди
During the interview, the members of the Commission will ask you questions. Please give concise answers to the core of the matter, and the Commissioner asking the question may limit the time of your answer.
Якщо так станеться, що наші
If it so happens that our interview is interrupted for technical reasons, unfortunately we have had a case like that today, we will communicate with you, we will reach you, and we'll continue with this interview at some other time on the other day. Let's hope this will not happen. And before the interview, you will have a chance to present yourself, tell about your motivation and the ideas that urged you to participate in this election. And now let me give the floor to Yevhen and Robert. Thank you, Ivan. Oleg, so let me present your autobiography for the audience watching our process. So this is candidate Oleh Yakymiak, born in 1968, born in the town of Horodok, Lviv region. He worked for quite a period of time as a legal counselor, and since 2009 he's been registered as sole proprietor, and he's a lawyer. Now he's also the head of the law firm Kushnir Yakymiak and Partners, and the overall work record is 25 years, 23 out of them in the field of law. He's a member of quite a number of NGOs, and he's the secretary of the trustee board of the Church of St. Nicholas in Kyiv. He's the head of the Association of Tax Consultants. He's prepared quite well-grounded motivation letter with a focus on Christian values, and he has mentioned that he is the head of the charitable fund Michael L.K. And it should be noted that our candidate was the member of the PIC within the selection process for the Supreme Court. That's why he has some experience of working with selection processes, in particular in the judiciary. So that's the information about Oleg. And please, Oleg, maybe you have missed something and you would like to add something. Please, the floor is yours. Tell us about your motivation. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, for your introduction. And let me start with my motivation. And before that, I would like to share some of my observations that I've got over my work experience. When I started my practice of being a lawyer, I actually perceived court as the four-polar box. I'm taking this term from physics. This is the box where you've got one signal at the entry point, like variable current, and then at the exit you have 12 volt, a different one. And we are not interested in the transformations that happen inside this box. We are interested in the input and the outcome. So that's the way I viewed court. That was a kind of a temple for me where justice is administered, and when people enter court with a dilemma or with a dispute, they just expect the result, the final outcome. And they definitely understand that everything is happening there in the right way. The transformations are right, and the results are also always fair and just, but for some exceptions when they have to go to appellate court. But then I started noticing that this is not that way sometimes, or rather it's almost quite often not like that. And I could trace some things that had nothing to do with justice. They were unfair. Then, you know, the court and the judiciary has been under reform since the moment Ukraine gained independence. So over time, I could trace such things when people, when it was said that court should be close to people, it should be providing judicial services to people, and judges started grounding their activity on the statement that they are providing services, and since they are providing services, why shouldn't they be getting some benefits from that? And of course, that was the approach, distorting the reality and breaking the unity of Syrian practice and conformity of different practices of different judges. And there appeared court decisions that had the same circumstances in the case, but absolutely different decisions and outcomes. So court started being transformed into an institution that is just trading law. To deal with this, the court needed some cover. And the easiest way, the simplest way, was to get some political cover. And that's why the judiciary became dependent on political power. It deviated from the principles of independence and became dependent on the political power. Hence, the judiciary started becoming closed, and it was all based on relationships. As a result of that, we got some episodes in the recent past, which was the story of high commercial court, when we could see some manipulations with automatic case allocation. And after some time, there appeared judges who had much more cases than their colleagues, because of this notion of parallel specialization that was introduced into the system, and then it became the object for the criminal investigation. And a more recent story is with the circuit court, and now we have we are now facing this. I'm sorry, Oleh, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if you could come closer to your motivation, your vision, and not just, let's not focus on the facts we all know about, but just tell about your motivation and you personally. The point is that in your motivation, we can see several important statements. I think that my colleagues will discuss these statements with you. And one of the statements is that you compare corruption with a bad smell from your mouth. And if a person gets accustomed to the smell, the person doesn't notice it, and he or she needs a prompt that he or she has this smell. What about fighting corruption? Normally, it's a very difficult thing to do. For you, if we speak about you, are you ready to speak in the open that there is this smell of corruption in the air and do it on a daily basis? Are you ready for this? Well, that is in fact my motivation. I think that I should be dealing with that. And I want to deal with this. Just for courts to stop trading in the truth and trading in the law. We're now talking about the judiciary, and this analogy with a smell from the mouth is something I liked, because corrupt acts and corrupt practices are identified with corruption as such. Corruption is the status, it's the condition of a person or of the system, and gradually, step by step, this corruption is going deeper and deeper. It's becoming deeply rooted. It's like a box of or a glass of pickled cucumbers, and if a person gets into such a can, he or she is also spoiled, becomes pickled. And as the Catholic servants have said, everybody should be guided by the best people, and if those people start being spoiled, there will be total collapse. And using another analogy, we may say that we should add water to this jar of pickled cucumbers. Okay, it's clear. If you analyze your financial status, let me mention that you've got quite a good income. Not everyone, if everyone could have it, it would be fine. From 1998 up to 2022, your official income is 22 million, and over the year 2021, you have got 3 million revenues. And I would like to ask you some questions about the issues that are still dubious concerning your share in the authorized capital of one of the companies, EOS. We know that it has not been declared. The amount is not large, but still, how could you account for that? I must acknowledge that I really did not declare these corporate rights, the share in the authorized capital of EOS LLC, because I thought that I'm no longer the shareholder of this company since 2019. So why did you think so? Let me explain. You know, there were four founders of that LLC, and I was invited to be the founder by 3 engineers, because in my previous work I had to deal with some engineering and construction companies. So I was invited by those 3 engineers just to support the legal component of this activity, but the activity as such appeared not to be profitable. And in the year 2008, during the period of the financial crisis, I actually decided to withdraw from the company. So I applied for withdrawal to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly passed the decision under the protocol, and then there was supposed to be some submission of documents for re-registration. I mean, for striking me off the register. I submitted the application, and everybody told me then everything is fine, but I just failed to check this. Unfortunately, I lost any contacts with those partners. I didn't ever inquire because I thought that it's settled. And then when I got my materials in the case during the selection process, I found out about this situation. I tried to find them and to understand why it happened so, but I failed to. That's why if you have more than 25% or 20%, less than 25% in the authorized capital, you can actually withdraw on your own and register these changes on your own, and that's what I've recently done. All right, Ola, here is information that you have provided in your motivation letter. You indicate that you are the head of the charitable foundation, Archangel Michael LK, instead of some other person. What is your status? Are you an officially appointed head of this charitable foundation? And how do you combine this activity with the status of the member of the HQCJ? Well, I haven't actually got the essence of the question. Well, the essence is simple. If you are a member of the HQCJ, you cannot be the head of the charitable foundation. It wouldn't be absolutely correct. So what is your function? What is your power in that foundation? Well, I deal with organizational work, which means that you have the right of signature and the right to dispose of the money. Yes. Okay, thank you. Let me give the floor to my colleague, Robert Brockhuizen. You're welcome, Robert.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Yakymiak. Sorry about that. When I read your motivational letter, I see that the Catholic Church is clearly very important in your life. Because in the letter there's quite a lot of reference to the Knights of Columbus, where you are a member of, which is you can maybe explain it yourself better than I can do. And also you have reference letters from the Knights of Columbus and also from a... sorry that I'm not making a mistake. From the Ukrainian, from the Archbishop even, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, the Archbishop, yes. And in the letter you start with it, and then you say, which I maybe see as your theme, corruptio optimi pessima. That's the statement that you make in the letter, and that's one of the reasons I believe that motivates you to apply. And you say, after corruptio optimi pessima, you say, decay of the best is the work as the priests of the Catholic Church think. Decay makes judges dependent, since they already cannot differentiate between good and evil for the sake of passing fair decisions. What would the Catholic Church about people who you describe at corruptio optima pessima? What do you do about that? How do you solve something that you describe here?
Can you hear me? So I will comment upon the Knights of Columbus. This is the secular organization of Catholics, the international one. It was founded in the USA in the 19th century. It was founded by Mr. McGinney, a priest, to support men, since this is the, or rather, family, to support families in which men either perished and died, or they are cripples. They have become cripples and cannot maintain their families. The members of this Catholic organization are the people recommended by the priest who knows them very well. You can get to the Knights of Columbus only on the basis of the recommendation of the priest, and that means that only practicing Catholics can become members of this organization. And I've mentioned about the confession and about other things. So these are the things which are the prerequisites for becoming a member of this organization, because these elements kind of support your moral condition, preventing you from any decay. I think that we can influence corruption in the judiciary applying some of our principles. I think that honesty is the thing that is not regulated, cannot be regulated by any rules. We will always, we may always have the rules, we may have some restrictions, but the problem will always be there because somebody will be willing to trespass the rules. And this willingness to trespass the rules may be motivated by a lot of things, like to get rich or other things. But there are some curbing factors for that. And these are as follows: either fear of punishment or unwillingness, internal inner feeling of unwillingness to make this trespass, not to obey the rules. A lot of people, and that is probably right, that should also be a priority, because this means the present-day regulation. So a lot of rules are being established, and that's also important. But I'm just addressing a different aspect of working with this problem. You should work with the moral status, moral condition. Even if we are speaking about the judiciary, we should work with the moral status of judges who will gradually become just unwilling to violate the rules, to make any trespasses. That is what my vision is.
Okay.
And with this in view, while working in the PIC,
Okay.
during the first term of the PIC, I actually appealed to moral authorities, moral people of high morale. And for example, we had His Beatitude, Lubomir Huzar. It was the former head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. He was a very well-known person, both in Ukraine and I guess beyond Ukraine. He was the cardinal. So I actually invited him, and everybody liked his wisdom. And when I invited the members of the PAC of the first calling to a meeting, we had 2 meetings actually, and each of them an hour and a half long. They left the meetings with great enthusiasm and inspiration.
Okay.
And I was impressed with that effect these meetings had on them. And after that, when I was supposed to apply for the second term of the PIC, I decided to keep working in the same direction. And we have a very unique story
Thank you,
in
thank you.
Ukraine. It's about the All-Ukrainian Church Council.
Well, sorry to interrupt you. Of course, you have lots to tell, but there are also a few questions I would like to ask you. I must say, when I think about what you say, what you say is that in your letter that the fact that you are, let's say, a devoted Catholic and a member of the Knights of Columbus is a proof of your integrity. You show in your letter this under the subject where it is requested to provide an explanation about your integrity, and then you explain your membership of the Knights of Columbus and why you think this is important. This, of course, raises a few questions. For instance, it raises the question that Knights of Columbus are only male. It's a male arrangement. There are no females a member of the association. And as a member of the HQCJ, you will have to possibly also select females. How you look at that?
Well, I'm married. I have got children.
But do you believe that females and males are equal in, let's say, for such positions? Or if I look at the website of the Knights, I don't see that immediately.
I think that men and women are equal. All the more, I can tell you that not a single religion in the world respects women so much as Christian religion does. Well, sorry for saying this, but this respect is manifested even in the very essence, in the very core of the religion. God was born on the earth as a woman, by a woman, and therefore equality is really important. And men and women are the same, they are equal, there is no doubt about it.
So you don't have any difficulties if a woman works and does not, during the day, looks after her family? Okay.
Yes, it's absolutely fine. The only thing is bad that man cannot give birth to children.
No, I know that, of course. If you are chosen the HQCJ, you may also have people who apply, who, for instance, are homosexuals. Would you have a difficulty to select them for the position of judge?
No, I will not have difficulty. I differentiate between a person, an individual, and his or her actions. I'm not an angel, I'm not a saint, and I'm even not a friend of the Pope. That's why I cannot judge them, including homosexuals. I do not admire what they do. I do not admire the practice of homosexuals, but I have no objection to even to having a friend like this. I have friends who are homosexuals. I'm not fighting this phenomena as such, but I differentiate, of course, between them. I don't have any problems in communication with such people. I'm not the one to condemn them and to say that they are bad people just because of that.
And if there would be women who would apply for the HQCJ and they would be supportive of abortion, that would be also no difficulty to select them as judges? Because I understand abortion in Ukraine is legal up to 12 weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, unfortunately, you're right about this term, and this means that the state is tolerating this approach. But, you know, I'm convinced that a person is a person starting with the moment of conception. We have got this DNA and this spirit coming from the fetus after conception, and this fetus will result only in a human. That will not be a cat, a fish. That will be just a child, a human. Well, as far as women are concerned who think that their body is their business, well, it's their idea. I do not share this idea. I object to this approach, and I object to abortions. But if that's all only about such belief of this woman, I will cope with this. I mean, it will not be a criteria for me not to allow her to hold this position in the judiciary.
Thank you. I will pass the floor to my colleague, Mr. Markman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yakymiak, for participating in the competition. I've seen a number of definitions and different understandings of the concept of communitarianism. Can you just tell me generally what you understand it to mean? I think you avow that philosophy. You suggest it's a political philosophy, but I thought it was more of a philosophical doctrine. But again, perhaps there are different understandings of the concept. And I was just curious. Largely curious to know what you meant by communitarianism, because I've seen a variety of quite different understandings of what it means.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. In fact, I used this concept just to draw your attention to two things. Yes, that is a philosophical doctrine. And if we speak about the judicial reform, I come to like two elements in it. The first element is that this doctrine tells us about the common welfare, common good. And at some points of time, this common good is more important than individual good. This concept is really important as for me, because according to this concept, moral, spiritual people are always able to choose the priority, to select the priority in favor of the common good. And the other point I like about it is that communitarianism considers this to be shameful or wrong to apply any liberal market practices in societal relationship, in social relationship, where they are not applicable. I used to always tell that, for example, even the bar cannot be a business. Since when attorneys at law start applying the rules of the market and creating demand and supply, that actually transforms all this activity into something different than it would be expected to be, not in accordance with its designation. And of course, this is not a thing that should be happening in the judiciary, in spite of the fact that, as I've already mentioned, at some point of time, talks were launched that the court is just a service provider.
Well, when we talk, I guess what's most important to me is this, Mr. Yakymiak. When we talk about the rule of law, are we talking about natural law, or are we talking about positive law? Are we talking about the law of Ukraine? Or are we talking about some higher law? Are we talking about communitarianism in any of its various forms? So my question is, I think, a pretty simple one. I respect your right to whatever views and attitudes and philosophies and sense of what's right and what's wrong. But I just want to understand the one thing. What do you think the rule of law connotates to you? Because you'll be making decisions that are based upon the rule of law. You'll be trying to elevate the rule of law of Ukraine. You'll be doing things that surround the concept of the rule of law, and I just want to know what your understanding is of it, just as I've asked many other candidates what they understand the rule of law to be, because that's basically that's the mission and that's the tool.
Thank you for the question. Well, I interpret the rule of law as based on the natural law, which is a priority one as compared to positive law. And decisions or application of the rule of law or the decisions that we see when the rule of law is applied should be based on the principles, certain principles, on certain values. They should be grounded on those values. Of course, the law, the letter of the law, sets certain directions and restrictions as well as certain rules. But if the law, to a certain extent, sometimes, in some cases, stops working for the sake of the common good and starts working in favor of a specific strata of the society that uses it, then this law probably, well, I cannot find the words, but causes the right to a revolt. And, for example, suppose we have a discussion ongoing that decisions can be passed by AI. or that we can be using some additional modern technologies in the decision-making process. I think that this is next to impossible because decisions should be value-based decisions. Right, we can get some help in processing of information from AI, and we can get some help in other elements, but finally, the decision has to be passed by a human, as I think, on the basis of values.
In America, where I come from, we have two great founding documents. One is called the Declaration of Independence, and the other is called our Constitution. Our Declaration of Independence is a very natural law infused document. It is based upon many such natural law principles, and it's understood that these are principles that the legislature is free to adopt if it sees appropriate. But when we talk about our Constitution, most scholars of all different faiths and perspectives and political attitudes think that the language of the Constitution, what you and I have both called the positive law, is how we give meaning to that document. You don't really see that differentiation so much, do you?
Do you mean whether I see the differences in Ukraine?
Yeah, again, I'm not suggesting Ukraine it has all the same precepts that America does, but you don't see that differentiation between the realm of the realm of the natural law, which would largely be viewed as being within the purview of the legislature, and the realm of the positive law, which would largely be within the realm of the judiciary. The judiciary is obligated to read the Constitution and read the enactments of the legislature and try to understand the meanings of those laws, which may or may not be based upon the natural law themselves.
Well, sure, my answer will be brief. We are just on our way. There is some difference between these two realms, and there is the difference between Ukraine and America. We don't have your practice and your experience. We're just on our way. And I would say that it's sometimes difficult to understand this. I've forgotten the word, sorry. To understand the notion of the rule of law and the ability to apply it to ensure this rule of law is a thing which is rarely practiced in Ukraine.
But let me ask you one more question that many people think is very important in this area. And we had U.S. Supreme Court decisions in the early years of our nation that tried to give some understanding to these principles. But if you had a dozen judges, 12 judges, who were seated in a room and they were talking about the law, and specifically they were talking about the natural law, do you think there would likely be an agreement among those 12 judges? Let's assume they're all very strong men and women of faith. Do you think there would be agreement on what the principles of the natural law were? And if not, would you be at all concerned that we might have 12 different rules of law that would be applied? That wouldn't seem to be tenable, would it? Or do you think there's more agreement on the natural law than my question's suggesting? I'm not trying to lead you in any direction. I'm just genuinely curious as to what your thinking is, because you will be on the High Qualifications Commission making judgments about the judiciary of your country. And I just wonder what kind of principles you'll be looking to in making those decisions.
Well, thank you for the question. First of all, I would assume that these 12 judges, because of being people of faith, are smart people, intelligent people, and they also have their hearts. And all this together can really work well. And I hope that they apply all these things in their decision-making process. I would say that this is still possible to reach a consensus. And let me tell you a story which I have about a unique organization which we have in Ukraine. This is the All-Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations. It has 16 churches and organizations, canonical ones, Judeans, Muslims, Protestants, and Christians, Orthodox and Catholic ones. And the principle of decision-making is consensus-based. If there is no consensus, there is no decision. It's really difficult. But anyway, people are people with high moral reputation. They are reputable people, reputable generally in Ukraine and in their communities in particular. And these people are capable of passing consensus-based decisions. They really pass them. They respond to all the events that become relevant for Ukraine. They managed to reach consensus. So I can assume, therefore, that among intelligent people who have high morale, it's for these people it's possible to reach a consensus even if they have different views. If these people are sometimes applying different principles.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts on this. I appreciate it, Mr. Yakymiak. And again, thank you for your participation. Let me turn you over to my colleague, Judge Zarzachny, please. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Yakymiak. I'm rather interested in a number of points. Let me begin by asking you a question or two about your experience as a member of the Public Integrity Council. We have had a number of candidates have different ideas about the role and involvement of the Public Integrity Council in the future work of the High Qualification Commission of Judges. You're seeking appointment as a member of the HQCJ, and you will bring with you, if you are successful, your experience with the Public Integrity Council. I would be interested in hearing your suggestions for the role and involvement of the Public Integrity Council in the work of the HQCJ. What would you see as a good model of participation by the Public Integrity Council?
Thank you. Well, I wouldn't like to keep telling about one and the same thing, as it could seem, but, you know, the PAC, for me, means something. I mean that even when I was still a member of the PAC, I got a sudden understanding of how it should work. When I became a member of the Public Integrity Council, back then, there was a certain conflict between the PAC and the Commission. It seems to me that this conflict was already there for about half a year. And there were some attempts made to somehow resolve this conflict, to reconcile the parties, so to say, but it resulted from the démarche of the public council after the qualification assessment was launched, and somehow it overlapped with some other prior elements of conflict, and there arose substantial conflicts. You know, the law sets the function of the PIC very clearly and sets the status of the PIC as their assistant for the HQCJ. And I somehow could not understand why the HQCJ is rejecting this assistance, is ignoring this assistance in a very demonstrative, obvious way. The HQCJ was like an opponent to the PIC. That's what it looked like. And since I'm a little bit older than my colleagues, I was a little bit older than my colleagues in the PIC, so I started communicating with the commission. I was trying to reach some consensus, to find some points in common to solve this problem. And I told that the PIC is really an assisting body if it's used in the right way. And I can tell you that even now, I think that is the way it is, and that is the way it should be, and this would be enough for reaching some success and for having some progress. But this should be perceived in the right way by the HQCJ. And at that time, I suggested some compromise because, there was a discussion concerning integrity criteria. And it was said that, okay, we have written out the criteria, we have prescribed the criteria which are based on the Bangalore principles and the principles of the Code of Judicial Ethics. Let's consider them and you will pass them. And they said, okay, yes, these are good principles, but there are some details, because every criterion should be considered individually on an individual basis with every specific personality. We said that no, it's not exactly the case, because if you don't account for some property that could not actually, let me rephrase it. I'm talking only about the criteria which are not dubious, not doubtful. They have been proven. And at that time, I had a clear impression that the Public Integrity Council was perceived as a kind of a dog who's just playing close to your legs and obstructs you in your movement. The HQCJ somehow set the task for itself and considered itself to be the largest agency, the largest employment agency. And
Mr. Yakymiak, I am well aware of the history between the Public Integrity Council and the HQCJ. We've heard a great deal about that in our work. I'm simply asking you, what would you recommend as the role of the PIC with this new High Qualification Commission? Would there be any different role to be played by the PIC? Any other contribution they can make?
Well, the PIC doesn't have any other tools to provide any other assistance, I would say. The Beatification Institute of the Catholic Church, there used to be the position called Fidea Promoter, or the one who strengthens faith. And that was the devil's attorney, the deus lawyer. But after the well-known movie, the very meaning of this term changed. And during the beatification of someone for him to become a saint, the function of this devil's attorney was to collect the negative information, all the negative information about this person that would make it impossible for him to become a saint. And that is the function which the PIC seems to be. It's a very important function. It's something that is really required. And if the PIC provides the information collected about a certain person and the law determines that information is collected together, negative information is collected together, and an opinion is provided. So the PIC does not compare it to the positive sides of this individual. The task is only to provide a negative opinion. So there is no comparison. The PIC has collected both negative and positive information, and then the opinion should be actually made in comparison. Whether this person, to identify whether this person could become a judge. So I think that the function of the PIC is a good function. It's something necessary, it's something required. And well, I don't think that any other assistance could be provided by the PIC with the toolkit that it has.
Thank you for that answer. Both with respect to the recommendations or the opinion of the PIC in the selection of candidates for the Supreme Court of Ukraine, the new Supreme Court, and the opinions expressed to the Public Council of International Experts in the selection of judges for the High Anti-Corruption Court. In both those cases, some of the opinions of the PIC were accepted and led to certain negative consequences for those candidates, and some of the opinions were not accepted. And there were reasons expressed for the non-acceptance, although I think there is a concern about how clear those reasons were given. If you are elected or appointed as a member of the HQCJ, would you accept all opinions of the PIC without question, or would you use the opinion as part of the information, the larger information that you would have to consider in determining whether a judge candidate should be appointed or not? So would you accept the opinions without question, or would you use the opinion as only one factor to be considered?
We had a long discussion with the Commission about the standards of proof. Negative information should be confirmed. It should be verified and confirmed. If negative information is already available in the opinion, and if it has been already verified, definitely we should accept this information and take it into account. But I don't think that we can have any additional verification of this information. But at the same time, I do not support the idea that this negative information, which is already a criteria of lack of integrity, should be rejected. I mean that if we take the scale, we should also see the positive things, and probably the positive things outweigh the negative elements, and there should be a kind of a competition or striking the right balance between this negative and positive. But in a way, I also support the notion of positive discrimination. I'm critical of this. I sometimes think that it should be applied. I'm always critical about all the information I get. I mean, I should myself verify it. And the most important thing is that we need to provide the reasoning, provide the grounds. Suppose their PIC's opinion has been refuted, has been cancelled. I mean, if we don't take it into account, there should be provided the reasoning why, clear reasoning, and that would even help the PAC in the future to work better, because they will know what they have done wrong.
All right, I think I have your answer on that point and understand your view. Let me ask you another question. You know that as a member of the HQCJ, you have to be fair, impartial, and independent in your assessment of candidates. And you are very, very devoutly a Catholic, and you have the Catholic values, of course. What role would religion play in your evaluation of a candidate? Would you prefer a candidate who too holds strong religious convictions over a candidate who, for example, is an atheist?
So you mean in case everything else is the same about those two candidates, right?
Well, yes, perhaps.
It's a complex issue, I would say. I can actually tell anything answering your question now, but when it's time for making this choice, some other criteria may start coming into play. I don't think that in case all the other criteria are the same, I will do any bad to the common good if I appoint any of them. Maybe one of them will be more offended, more dissatisfied, but they are equal for me in this case, and the common good will not be affected by my choice. The principle of positive discrimination would rather urge me to choose to select an atheist.
Pardon me?
The principle of positive discrimination would rather urge me to select an atheist.
And so you would give preference to an atheist over a person devout in religion?
Yes.
Let me make one other comment or observation. You indicated that many Christian religious beliefs have a strong belief in the equality of women. And I must say, I have yet to meet a woman priest.
Let me give you the answer from the quotation by Lubomir Huzar, the cardinal I've mentioned. He said that I would agree to the approach when women become priests. The moment the man appears on the earth who gives birth to a child.
I see. All right, thank you, sir. I'll turn you over to my colleague, Judge Verlanov.
Пане Олеже, доброго дня вам.
Good afternoon, Oleh.
Хотів би з'ясувати у вас наступне запитання.
I have this question for you. In your motivational letter,
На запитання,
while answering the question about elevating the level of trust in the Ukrainian judiciary, you mentioned that should you be appointed as an HQCJ member, we should be working with the spirituality of members of the judiciary and forming of their values in order to have moral stability of the judiciary. So my question is as follows. How are you going to be implementing these proposals of yours? While I was a member of PIC, we have already started working on that together with the Council of Churches and Religious Organizations. We organized roundtable discussions. We talked about the so-called chaplains. Right now we have chaplaincy in healthcare. I haven't been tracing how it works, but that's what we declared. Also, we met judges. We had meetings with judges. It seems to me we only had such meetings twice to discuss some of the principles because, again, judges are very important people within the society. I would personally like for a judge to be somebody who is respected by the society. Unfortunately, today that's hardly the case. And sometimes your eyes well up, you feel really upset because judges are not even willing to disclose the information that they are judges. And it shouldn't be like that. And when I show up to an institution that represents judges, I want to meet people who are free, who are independent, who have no fear. Let me just finish, if I may. Through the All-Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations, so we have agreed on this chaplaincy. So they were ready to work with the Commission. So they have different religious figures. So should the HQCJ have Muslims among their members, we were thinking about having muftis among the members. Many of them are very intelligent and smart people, and even if you're an atheist, you would find a topic to discuss with these people. I'm not urging for everyone to follow some religious practices. I'm just advocating values. Europe has been built on Christian values. Now Europe is having a decline in these values, but when Europe was prospering, it was prospering on those Christian values. So this is my proposal, and I understand that we cannot accomplish that within a month, a year, but maybe in a couple of years we will be able to see a positive trend, having this cooperation between the Council of Churches and Religious Organizations and bodies of the judiciary. We have many people of moral authorities, like Miroslav Marinovich, for instance. And when he was asked very difficult questions, he understood that if he said no, he would be imprisoned, but he still said no, and he was imprisoned.
Добре зрозуміло, пане Олеже.
Thank you, Oleh. Your answer is clear.
if we involve these moral authorities, let me be frank here. When I see the eyes of my colleagues, from PIC after those meetings that we've had with moral authorities like that, I think that
Добре,
was
наступне
worth
до вас
it.
запитання.
Thank you. My next
Скажіть,
question.
будь ласка, ви вказуєте, що на початку 2000-х
So you are saying that in the early 2000s you were interested in political technologies, and for some time you were a consultant and assistant to an MP, Mr.
Чи підтримуєте ви
Ukolov.
комунікацію із колишніми чи
At present, do
теперішніми
you keep
політиками?
in touch
Та
with
чи є,
any former or
ви
incumbent
прихильником якоїсь
MPs,
політичної
and
сили?
do you support any political party?
На сьогоднішній день я не підтримую
At the moment, I don't keep in touch with any of those politicians.
на початку 2000
In the early 2000s, we had these political party reforms and order. It was a liberal party.
сьогоднішнього дня в нас немає реальної партії.
I don't think that we don't really have parties like that anymore.
Дуже багато людей, які виховалися.
Many people who were members of that party became famous politicians, and right now they are members of different parties.
У мене були особисті стосунки,
I had some personal relations
краще закінчилася ця історія, тому що дружина була
with one of the wives,
в національній службі в міністерстві.
and the wife was in the patronage service of the Ministry of Finances. Thank you. Thank you, Oleh. I have no more questions to you. I'm passing the floor to our chairperson, Mr. Mishchenko.
Пане Олеже, мої колеги задали вам всі
Олег,
питання.
My colleagues have asked you practically all the questions that are related to religion. That's why I have no more questions on that topic left. So let's
Хто
discuss
для
law.
вас є моральним авторитетом в
Who
праві?
is moral authority in the realm
От
of
зараз
law
ви
for
можете
you?
назвати трьох
Can you name
визначних для вас
three people
особистостей в українському праві?
in
Будь
the
ласка.
Ukrainian law who are authority for you?
Не зможу.
Їх немає взагалі, так?
So you don't have any authorities in the realm of law. I cannot give you any names. I have some people that I respect, but I cannot name them.
Скажіть, будь ласка, чому, на ваш погляд,
In your opinion,
саме судова система є уособленням
why is the
корупції
judiciary
і
the embodiment of
Невдалих реформ.
corruption and failed reforms?
бо якщо б вони були вдалими, вони
Because if
припинилися.
we had the reforms that were successful,
Чи ви не погоджуєтесь?
we would
не
stop with the
погоджуєтесь з цим
reforms at
тезом?
some point in time. Or do you disagree with this statement?
Не погоджуюсь.
I disagree with this statement.
Позиції, що це уособлення
I don't feel that the judiciary is the embodiment of evil or corruption.
Я трошки контекст поясню.
Well, let me give you further context. The question is that the majority of surveys
стабільно ставить судову систему
show
десь
that the judiciary is at the very bottom. If we are talking about the trust in the judiciary. So it's judiciary and political parties. So political parties enjoy even a smaller percentage of respect. And then we have the judiciary, all at the bottom.
тому що очікування занадто високі.
Because the expectations are too high.
Тому що судова система є локомотивом,
The judiciary is a locomotive
здатна і повинна
which is able and which should actually balance the other branches of the government and ensure equality in the society, ensure equal rights or their restoration.
тому що це очікування,
The expectations
воно дуже
when your expectations are not met, then you become really upset. The reality is a little bit different.
За моєї каденції більше 1000 суддів проходили
When I was on PIC,
кваліфікаційному оцінюванні.
we processed the materials for more than 1,000 judges who completed the qualification assessment. Not too many of them were bad people, but everybody knew about them. And when we had this situation with those kind of services, the services of the court being sold, then we are not talking about justice anymore. Of course, this was very damaging to the level of trust.
Почалися історії, що будь-які рішення можна
When people realized that any kind of decision of a court could be bought, that was another blow to the reputation of courts.
люди відчувають цю дискомфорт.
People are feeling the discomfort when the law is being sold. People have their conscience.
Більш приспана, менш приспана, якщо там можна.
Some are more conscientious, some are less.
Саме слово, воно, я не знаю, як це можна перевести колегам, міжнародникам, але
When we are talking about conscience,
совідати, тобто
at least
з кимось,
in the Ukrainian language, this word means that together with other people, you're knowledgeable about something. So Christians believe that this other person is the God.
цей інструмент совість,
And the people who have the conscience,
мати зв'язок з Богом. Тобто
they have this connection to
Пане
God.
Олеже, ми з вами знову виходимо на цю
Oleh,
релігійну
so
стежку,
we are again
від
coming
якої
back
я
to the topic of
намагався,
religion. I'm
відійти.
sorry. I was trying to get away from it a little
Ні,
bit.
це не те, що я все ж хотів сконцентруватися.
It's not that I minded,
Я почув
but
вашу відповідь.
let us focus on other
Ви
things.
все ж
Thank
таки
you.
апелюєте до якихось загальних
You are
цінностей,
constantly
я розумію.
appealing to more
Давайте я
universal
спробую,
values.
таке запитання.
So let me ask you a different question.
Скажіть, будь ласка.
дозвольте тоді дійду до того прикладу,
So
ну,
let
окей,
me
давайте.
give you a specific example then, if you don't mind.
досліджувалися ці справи суддів.
So when we were examining the judicial dossiers, we were collecting information and we noticed this curious fact that very often we had cases under Article 130, driving under the influence.
Притягнення до відповідальності.
And very often, the procedural terms are missed in cases like that. As a lawyer, I understand that it shouldn't be happening.
Ті рішення, якими карають,
And we notice that on one and the same day, people can be convicted for this kind of offense, and some people are let go without any punishment. And when we did our research, we saw that some judges had 30, 40, or even 50 cases like that when they missed their procedural terms. But during the interview, they said it was the lawyer to blame.
після такого, якби я розумію, про що йдеться.
And after having these examples, I understand why people are losing trust in the judiciary.
Припустимо, цифра у 2,5 тисячі суддів,
Let's assume
які
that
працюють в
we
судовій системі,
are having
правильно.
2,500 vacancies in the judiciary.
Зараз для того, щоб стати суддею,
In order to be appointed as a judge according to the Ukrainian law,
сама процедура – це мінімум рік.
it will take you at least a year to go through all the stages of the selection. And the selection procedure itself is quite
Складна і взагалі
complicated.
зарегульована.
And it's regulated
ви
rather
особисто, чи
harshly.
вважаєте саму процедуру
So you personally, do you
такою,
believe
що
that the
відповідає
procedure
особисто вашому
itself
баченню? Чи слід її
corresponds to your
скорочувати?
personal vision?
Якщо слід
Should we
скорочувати, то що
shorten
саме
the
слід скорочувати?
terms? And if we
ця
should, what
процедура,
should be
якби,
shortened?
окей?
Or is
Контекст цього
everything
запитання,
fine with the
звичайно,
procedure?
полягає в тому, що
I'm asking you this question
як
because
нас в комісії всі запитували весь цей час,
everybody
то коли
has
буде нова
asked our
ВККС.
commission
Точно так же і
about
в нової
the end
ВККС
of our selection. The same
запитувати,
questions
то коли ж
will be
будуть нові
asked
судді?
of the new HQCJ as to when all the vacancies
І я
will be
не впевнений,
filled.
що відповідь через півтора
And I'm
року
not sure that the answer in a year and a half will be
на ваш
satisfying
погляд.
for the
От
people.
якщо обирати між якістю,
So
строками,
if we choose
процедурами,
between the quality,
Будь ласка.
procedure, the timelines, what should we pick?
Є переконання, що жертвувати якість
It is my belief that we cannot forsake quantity over quality. Can we speed up the process? I hope that we can achieve that, but it may be instead of a year, we can have 10 months. I understand the challenge lying ahead. And I even feel that the first discussions that the new HQCJ is going to have with me or without me will be about these things, about meeting the deadlines or shortening the duration of the process. And I think it will harm the candidates. The candidates must go through all the stages.
я не буду критикувати процедуру.
I'm not going to criticize the procedure. I accept it the way it is.
Можливо, з деякими там поправками
Maybe with some minor adjustments, not simplification, but improvements. But I think that any judge must go through the process because if they want to be appointed as a judge, they have to go through this process in a dignified way, in an honorable way, to enjoy the respect that any judge should be getting from the society. And if we speed up the procedure, some people will be lucky, others will be less lucky. I'm not talking about abuse, but in general, it will damage the judiciary. Let it be in a year, but we will get quality. And if we do it gradually, step by step, and people see that the selection is fair, then the best will apply.
Окей. Ви
If people don't see that, then
я вас почув. І
it
дякую
will be
вам за
hard
те, що
for us to
відповіли
have
на моє
those
наступне
best
запитання,
candidates.
яке я-
Thank you for
яке
answering the
планував
question
задати,
I
але
was
вже не
planning to
відповів.
ask, but you have already answered it. Thank you.
Дякую. Чи будуть ще запитання до
Thank you.
Дозвольте,
звичайно.
я
Do we have any
враховуючи
additional
практику, я
questions?
попрошу пана Олеже,
For lack of time,
ну, скажімо, компактно
I will
відповідати на ваші
ask
два
you,
питання,
Oleg,
які
to
я
be
вважаю, що
very
маємо
precise
говорити,
when
оскільки
answering
вони
these
відповідають
questions.
тим
I think
критеріям,
that
які ми
these
визначили для
questions
нашого
must be
кандидата.
discussed
Перше,
because they comply with the criteria we have established for our candidates. It's the question of political neutrality. It was mentioned that you've been an assistant consultant of the MP Ukolov. So you yourself disclosed this information. In what context and when did you work with that MP? And are you currently involved in any political activities?
був 2004 рік, якщо
It was back in 2004, if I'm not mistaken, right after the Orange Revolution.
працював, пройшло десь півроку.
And I worked with that MP for some 6 months.
Що саме ви робили, власне?
So, what
Яка
exactly were you
функціональна
doing? What
навантаження
was your role?
Прошу,
Ви юридичні поради.
зрозуміло.
I was legal
І ще
counsel.
останній момент. Серед різного роду контекстних
And
речей,
my
які ви
final
зазначили в
question.
своїй мотиваційній
Among many
листі,
things that you mentioned in your motivational letter, you indicated that among the risks that may cause concern of the selection commission is the fact that there was a conflict between PIC and HQCJ, which resulted in a number of misunderstandings and in a way blocked some of the procedures. Why do you think that this situation is a risk pertaining to you as a candidate? Do you believe that you did something wrong back then? Why did you make this statement? Thank you for the question. I was thinking that if I was reviewing the materials about a judge and if I saw some conflicts, I was already having bias. I was coming with the bias towards that person. So I extrapolated that situation, and I thought that maybe somebody else could tell me that, listen, you had this conflict with HQCJ when you were on PIC, and should you be appointed as an HQCJ member, you will be having conflicts with PIC. I hardly think that people will hold this against you, because some of the former members of PIC are among our candidates. Well, I think it's good, of course, but I don't know what kind of information you have with regards to that conflict. Thank you. Now I understand you. Frankly speaking, I don't see any risk here, but this is my personal opinion as a commissioner. Mr. Chair, that's all from my side. Do we have any additional questions? Oleg, we are now coming to your concluding remarks. There were some things that I wanted to say, but that's fine. I don't want to move your time. That's a pity that I was answering your questions in such a long-winded way, but at the very end, I would like to say that we have found ourselves in a very difficult situation because we are experiencing the aggression, this horrible war, and its radical destruction, which we are feeling. We are uncertain about our future. I was even having some doubts as to whether we were going to have this interview. We are changing the places where we are staying. We are moving from one place to another. But the war is not just about death, destruction, and awful suffering. It's also a cleansing procedure. I'm sure that after our victory, we will have this great demand in the society, the demand for fairness and justice. And we must all contribute to having a society where justice is not a commodity, where it's not sold. A society in which justice prevails. Thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for bearing with me for such a long time, and may God bless you. Glory to the armed forces of Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. Thank you, Oleg. With this, your interview has come to an end. All the best to you. Take care and goodbye. Goodbye.